Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Brands, and I'm delighted to be talking with you today. I hope that wherever you are, you're being safe and, staying safe during these quarantine and difficult times. So, as I said, my name is Jonathan. I'm currently in my first tour as a Foreign Service officer. I work in the political section of the embassy, but I'm currently working in the front office as a staff assistant. So I work directly with the ambassador and our charge d'affaires, the person who's second in charge. Um, I really like Russia. I was a student here about 4 years ago in Nizhny Novgorod, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But first, we're really here today to talk about my experience at the University of Virginia, where I studied as an undergrad student. And I prepared a clip, or I didn't prepare a clip, but I have a clip to show you guys just to give you a taste or a flavor of what it was to be what it is like at the University of Virginia. So we'll play that shortly.
The energy and the passion here at UVA is unparalleled, and I think that energy is what drives all of us together to work together and push ourselves to become the best that we can be.
Everyone can make UVA what they want it to be.
You can take charge of what you do in your organizations and what you do in the classroom.
Once you find your place, you'll never want to leave.
To walk down the lawn or to go into these gorgeous old academic buildings and think I belong here, like I am part of this place, that's actually a really cool thing to go through.
Even on the hard days, there's always something good that reminds me I'm supposed to be here.
More than anything, it's the people. It's the people that I'll remember the most.
And those people have been the most important in shaping who I am.
Okay, so I think if you saw from that clip, you got a little bit of an idea of what University of Virginia is like. It's a great school. It's the fourth public school in the country, or the number 4 public school by rankings. It was founded by Thomas Jefferson, our third president, in 1819. So its 200th anniversary was last year, and was actually the first public school, or the first government school or state school in the United States. It has a beautiful campus. I believe a lot of the pictures you saw were of the lawn, and that's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But I'll get into some more of that stuff later. I'm first going to start off with a little bit of my background and my story and why I chose to go to the University of Virginia. So right now I'm a Foreign Service officer, but my dad was also a Foreign Service officer, and as a result of that, when I was younger, I actually grew up overseas. I grew up in Africa for 12 years, and I moved from one country to the other. So even though I'm an American and I was born in the United States, after I was 3 years old, I spent 12 years in Africa. I came back to the U.S. when I was in high school in the 10th grade, and I spent my last 3 years in Virginia. So when I moved back, I went to school for 3 years, and my dad, my mom, and my brother, they were all going to go back overseas again. And so when I was applying for colleges, they said, we're not going to be there for you. So we want to make sure that you have family or friends that are nearby. And as a result of that, that kind of guided where I chose to go to school, where I chose to apply to school. My dad's from Illinois. My mom's from Montana. And then we have family friends in Boston and on the West Coast. So I applied to the University of Washington in Washington State, Northwestern in Chicago. I actually applied to Harvard in Boston. I did not get into Harvard, but that's another story. And the University of Virginia. I ended up applying to 7 colleges, all near my family and my friends, and I ended up getting into 5. Um, it wasn't really a tough choice for me about which school to go to because as a Virginian, I'm very proud of my state. I'm very proud of the United States, but I'm also very proud of my state. And being from Virginia, it meant that the school, University of Virginia, is a lot cheaper for residents of Virginia. Across the United States, you have private schools and you have public schools. And because the University of Virginia was a public school and it was paid, like a lot of the Virginian taxes go towards it, it meant that the tuition was a lot cheaper. So for people who are not from Virginia, it was almost 5 times as expensive, 6 times as expensive. But for me, it was cheaper. On top of that, as I mentioned, we had family friends that lived there. And also, a lot of my high school friends who I went to school with in Northern Virginia were going there as well. In fact, my best friend from high school was going there. So that was one of the big reasons that I went there. And I'd also visited when I was in high school. My parents would take us on trips, and we went down to Charlottesville, which is in central western Virginia. It's almost in the foothills, and I believe you saw some of the mountains there. And we visited, and I realized it was a really beautiful campus, and that I don't know, it had a lot to offer. It had a lot of the things I was looking for, a lot of the subjects I was interested in, but also the fact that I had family and friends nearby and that it was cheaper was probably like the main reasons I ended up going there, as opposed to another very good school, Northwestern, which was a private school in Chicago, near where my grandparents live. Um, I will say this, my first year at undergrad was tricky. It was a little bit difficult because it was a very, very big adjustment to go from being a high school student when you live with your parents to living by yourself and going to university in the US. Just imagine that, in high school you have structures, you have to go to class, you start in the morning, you end in the afternoon, there's all these rules. You go to college and there are no rules. You can go to class if you want, you don't have to go to class. If you don't, no one's going to get upset, no one's going to worry. And unfortunately, when I was 18, I wasn't as disciplined as I should have been. I decided that I was going to have more fun instead of studying, and my first year was actually very difficult because of that. You learn very quickly how to become a better student after you don't do very well. I'd been a very good high school student, but transitioning to college and figuring out how to be a student in college was difficult. It was also difficult being away from my family for the first time. Even though we moved from place to place, I always had them, and I didn't realize how challenging that could be. So when you're considering going to the United States, realize that as cool as it is to have a lot of freedom, sometimes that comes with a cost, and that was my grades my first year. But fortunately, as I said, I lived in dorms, and dorms are kind of like shared dormitories. And I lived with my best friend from high school, so I had him for support. And on top of that, even though I didn't do very well in my first year's courses, they didn't matter as much because in most colleges in the United States, you get to wait 2 years before you decide what your major is or what your specialty is. So I took a lot of very different random courses my first 2 years to figure out what I really liked. I also, in that time, joined a fraternity. But when we talk about more of the social extracurricular activities, I'll talk more about what it means to be in a fraternity in the US. So as I said, my first year was pretty challenging as I tried to figure out what I was doing, as I figured out how to take my classes seriously, how to be a more serious adult. But after my first year, my second year, I started to focus. I started to take Arabic. So for most of my college years, I studied Arabic. And then I also realized that I was interested in international relations. I'd grown up overseas because of my dad and his work in the Foreign Service, and I realized that I also was interested in that. So with that, I was able to be a little bit more disciplined, and I took these courses. And those are the courses I took then, or I focused on for my second, third, and fourth year, as that became my major. So I majored in international relations, which had different components of theory, of practice, of history. Then I also I had a minor or a sub-major in Middle Eastern studies because of my Arabic background and the courses I took on that. But one of the great things about at least academics in the United States, especially in a liberal arts college, because the University of Virginia has different schools within it. They have a liberal arts college, an engineering college, a lot. You have all sorts of different schools, but I was in liberal arts. So I could take almost anything I wanted or that they offered. I took a course on astronomy. I took a history of science course. I actually took a class on Dutch art, which is actually really cool. I had no idea. And maybe more relevant to the people, to you all, I took a course on Tolstoy. I had never read a book by him. I knew he was Russian. I knew he wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina, but I took a full 4-month course, 1 semester length course, and it was great. It was my introduction to Russia and to Russian culture, and I really enjoyed it. And as I said, also because I studied Arabic, I was able to study abroad in Jordan for 6 months, which was also a really good experience. The University of Virginia and a lot of other universities actually really promote going abroad for a semester. Most people go to Europe, I imagine, but I went to the Middle East because I was interested in that. But I have to be honest, after 4 years, I graduated with a degree in international relations and a minor in Middle Eastern studies. But the best part of college in the U.S., I think, is not the stuff you do in class. It's important. You should study, definitely go to class. It's the things you do outside of class and all the culture and traditions that go along with it. So the University of Virginia is a very good school. It's in one of the premier sports leagues, the Atlantic Coastal, the ACC. And that's one of the sports leagues in Virginia. I mean, not in Virginia, but in the entire coast. We have schools like Duke, University of North Carolina, Boston College, Florida State. There's a bunch of different schools that are in this conference. And as a result of that, we're really big into sports. Our team is the Cavaliers, or we also go by the Wahoos. That's just our name. It's like the Chicago Bulls, but we're the University of Virginia Cavaliers. And because of that, sports are really big. In the fall, we have football, and one of the best things to do when you're there is you hang out with all your friends beforehand, and then you go and watch the game. And everyone gets dressed up. They do face paint. It's a really good time. And then in the winter time, we have basketball. Our university actually won the national championship in basketball last year, and I went with some of my University of Virginia friends, and we watched it in Minnesota. That's where they were playing the championship games. So sports and the collegiate sports were really, really popular, and it was a lot of fun to go to games and get together and to celebrate. But it wasn't just the professionals that played. At University of Virginia, if you wanted to play sports, there were club teams, there were intramural teams, they're all different levels. So you could play anything you wanted. You could play floor hockey, ice hockey, badminton. If there was a sport that exists, you could play it. There was a club that could do it. And I love that. So I really like to play basketball, floor hockey, and ultimate frisbee, which is a great game. I don't know. I think some people play it here in Russia, but it's not as popular here as it is in the U.S. But yeah, that was one of the really fun things about University of Virginia was getting involved. There are other things that you could do, such as you could join a band, you could play in the orchestra. There were all these different groups and clubs, like language clubs. I actually took some ballroom dancing courses while I was there, but that was very different. For me, it was mainly I really like to do sports. But the other really big part of my life when I was there was I decided to join a fraternity. And I'm going to talk a little bit about being in a fraternity, or as we like to call it, the Greek life, because all fraternities are named after, they're usually 3 letters in the Greek alphabet, like Phi Delta Beta or Phi Psi. We have different names. And I joined one that was called Phi Delta Theta or Phi Society. And there's a lot of stereotypes about what fraternities are. Some of those stereotypes are definitely true. But for the most part, for me, it was a family and a home away from home. Because my family was away, it was a group of men, and we would hang out, and we kind of we were a good social group and a good friend group and a good support group. And we had like a good time. For example, all the sports that I was telling you about, I played on those different sport teams in my fraternity against other fraternities. Um, the way it worked, at least in the University of Virginia, if you wanted to be part of the fraternity life or Greek life, you would first start as a rush. You would go to the different fraternities and like see if you're interested, if they liked you, if you liked them. If you guys both liked each other, and after a certain amount of events, you would become a pledge, and that means that you would have to go through a period of trial. Some of the stories are true, some of them are not, which are just, you'd go through different challenges, and then afterwards you become a brother. So it was like an initiation into like a group. And I really enjoyed it. They became some of my best friends who I joined my fraternity with. I just went back to the United States about 2 months ago before the coronavirus really was hitting. And I saw at least 7 or 8 of them. We were all celebrating one of my friend's wedding. So just to show you like the bonds and the closeness that would form in that group. And for me, that's what I take away from my university experience. Not just my degree, which was helpful, but also the friends that I made through all the extracurricular activities that we had at the University of Virginia. It's not unique to UVA or the University of Virginia, but it's definitely one of the highlights and one of their strengths, as you could have seen probably in that video. Let's see. So after I graduated from the University of Virginia, it was 2009, and we had a great recession in 2008 where the economy went a little bit bad, and it was very hard to find a job. So even though I had my degree, it was difficult. I'd been working my last 2 years when I was at university in order to make some money. I also worked in restaurants. I worked as a server. And so afterwards, I had to do that for a little bit. But then I finally decided to join the Peace Corps, where my dad had been a Peace Corps volunteer in Venezuela in the 1970s. And it's this organization that President Kennedy founded, where we send Americans, typically young, but it's any age, overseas to, serve the better good, work towards peace. So I joined that program, and in 2011, I went to Georgia, Tbilisi. I didn't live there. I lived in a small village, and I served there as an English teacher for 2 years. And it was a great experience, and it helped set me up to go to graduate school. But I'm not going to talk about that now. I'm going to kind of end it there, because I'm going to answer some of the questions that I see that have been coming in. But mainly, if you were to take one thing about university and going to college, and specifically the University of Virginia, is that it provides you, at least going to school in the United States, provides you with a whole lot of freedom and a whole lot of choices. There's so many things you can study, so many things you can do, and you just have to take advantage of it and enjoy it. And I'm not just talking about classwork, that there's so much stuff to do there, but there's also so many activities that you can do outside of class, and you can make such good friends. Some of my best friends in my life are still from when I was at the University of Virginia. And that's why I look back on it very positively. Almost everyone who went there really remembers it as a very good time. And we learn a lot. We become diplomats. We become all sorts of things. So with that is my spiel about the University of Virginia. Go Wahoos. If you're interested in studying abroad in the United States, I would definitely consider the school. But now I'm going to scroll through some of the questions that came in. The first was, what led you to choose a school? I believe I talked about that based on my family, my friends. All right, this is a really good question. Writing a statement of purpose is a difficult task for any student applying to U.S. schools. Do you remember your essay topic when you applied to college? What was your story about? So yeah, I do remember this, because for me, writing an essay is always very hard, because you're supposed to tell a story about yourself, which can be awkward. But I think you have to think about what's unique to yourself and make a story out of it. For me, the fact that I grew up overseas in Africa, and my dad was a diplomat, was very important to me, because it led to who I am. The first being that I love the United States. I'm a patriot. My dad served in the Foreign Service. I always grew up admiring him, admiring President Kennedy, admiring the Peace Corps, like service and giving back to your government and giving back to your country. So I love that. And the second was, I loved being overseas. I loved traveling. I loved seeing the world. Sometimes people think that's weird, to both love your country but also to love living elsewhere. But for me, it made sense. And so I wrote about how those two parts of me existed. And as a result of that, like I wanted to be in the Foreign Service and I wanted to study international relations. And I know that's my story, but there's so much stuff. People are so unique. You just have to come up with something that's unique about yourself. What drives you? What makes you who you are? And then why that makes you want to study something or do something. And that's how I took it. If you can make a narrative or a story of your life that's compelling and interesting, that's what you need to put on the paper. So we have another question. What were the biggest campus events at your college? Did you maintain interesting school traditions? Yeah. So University of Virginia is a very social school. We have a lot of different traditions, but one of the biggest one is Foxfield. Foxfield is a horse race that happens near our school. So I don't know if you know, in the United States, we have a thing called the Triple Crown, and it's where there's the three biggest horse races. There's the Kentucky Derby, there's the Belmont Stakes, and there's the Preakness. And these are just very big horse races. I think they're the biggest in the world. They're very expensive. I don't know why they're very popular, but they just are. So Foxfield's like a smaller version of that. And it usually happens in the spring when there's beautiful weather, and all the guys get dressed up very nice and kind of like suits, and all the girls wear sundresses, and we just go and we watch a horse race. And it's a lot of fun. That's one of the most fun traditions. I think it's just celebrating spring and celebrating the school year almost being done. We have other traditions that are probably not very appropriate, but they were fun at the time. The lawn is where we do a lot of stuff. So the lawn is the UNESCO World Heritage Site that you saw at the beginning. It's where you see the rotunda and everything like that. Usually for any sports events, all the families and all the friends and a lot of the school, they go there and we hang out and have a tailgate or a party before the sports games. And so that's a big tradition. And it's not just the current students, but also alumni. And like for myself, like I would go down there and we would hang out, and my friends from my fraternity would meet there and we'd have a little party before we went to go watch the football game. And that was a really fun tradition. Do I have Russian roots? That's the next question. I do not have Russian roots. German roots, Scottish roots, and Norwegian roots. But I do like Russia. Have you visited or worked in Russia before? What do you like or do not like about living here? So I have lived in Russia before. I was a student when I was a graduate student. I went to Tufts University, or the Fletcher School. We had a study abroad program in Nizhny Novgorod, and I went there for 2 months over the summer. I really, really liked it, actually. I think it was one of my best 2 months ever, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here in Russia. It was one of my best experiences, and I wish that I could. It's very different when you work as a diplomat in the embassy versus when you're a student. When you're a student, you have a lot more interaction with the people. You get to talk a lot more. As a diplomat, you're always busy. You have to work. You're in the office a lot. You don't get to really interact and meet as many Russians, which is unfortunate. So when I was a student, I really, really enjoyed it. I lived in a host family. I loved my host family. I had a really good teacher. I had really good co-students. It was fun. So I wish sometimes I could go back to that time. But have I traveled across Russia? What is my favorite city here? I traveled a little bit. I've been to Kazan, Nizhny Novgorod, St. Petersburg, but I haven't been able, unfortunately, to travel that much because I got here last year. Then it's the winter time, so it's really cold, and now there's coronavirus, unfortunately. So I hope when this epidemic hopefully ends and we have time, I very much want to go see the ring cities, the Golden Ring cities. I want to travel around some more, but unfortunately I haven't been able to travel as much. Do you eat fast food? Sometimes. Have you ever been to McDonald's or Burger King in Moscow? Do burgers taste like American ones or differently? All right, so I think I have been to McDonald's here, and I've been to Burger King, but I imagine those burgers taste the same as the ones back in the United States because, it's fast food. American burgers if you go to a different restaurant, burgers taste different everywhere. I think it just depends on the quality of the meat. I don't know. I prefer steak. I'm gonna be honest. If I was between burgers or steak, I would take a steak. Are Russians and Americans alike? If so, what do they have in common? I mean, yeah, I do actually think, despite despite things that are going on in the world and everything, I do think Russians and Americans are actually very similar. One of the things that I noticed was that we both have a sense of patriotism. A lot of us really love our country and have a lot of pride in what our country has done. Um, I've never seen a country that flies the flag more. Like, we fly the flag in America all the time, and I think in Russia, that's the first place I've seen where there's a lot of pride, and you have a lot of reasons to be proud of your country. And especially when I was in Nizhny Novgorod, it reminded me of being in the Midwest, where my grandma's from and where my dad's from. It's an area near Chicago. Just the people were friendly and nice. And, you know, Moscow, it's a big city. It's kind of like Washington or D.C. But out there, it was just people remind me of my grandma. So, and my grandma and my cousins. People are people. People are alike. I don't know. I guess that's all I got on that. What is your favorite? Oh, sorry, I'm seeing. Wow, there's a lot of questions coming in. Sorry, this is from Yuri Barabash. Oh, I was actually 12 years in Africa. What languages do I know besides English? I know English fairly well, Spanish, Georgian, a little bit of Russian, not enough Russian. I need to learn more Russian. And I did study Arabic, but I forgot a lot about that. Do you have friends from your college? I have friends from my college. Unfortunately, this is from Smiley Rain, but not here. They're all back in the United States. What was the occupation of my parents? Well, my dad was a diplomat, and so with us, we have to move every 3 or 4 years. From Anna D. Did you live on campus? If so, what did you like about your campus life? Yeah, I have. So I did both. I lived on campus for my first 2 years, and I lived in a dorm, as I said. And in the dorm, you have to have a roommate. You share a room with someone else. Fortunately, I lived with my best friend, and we're still best friends. So that tells you that we were pretty good roommates. I mean, I like him a lot still. I hope he still likes me. But then and it was really good because you're close to classes. It was a short walk to go to class. But then my third and my fourth year, I lived in my fraternity, and that was in an own separate house. And so you live with your best friends in almost not a mansion, but it's a big house by itself. And I really enjoyed that. But of course, it was a longer walk. It was like 10-minute walk to class, which isn't too bad. I have a long question from Anna Ostanenko. Have you got a master's degree? And in your opinion, how many people have a master's degree? I do have a master's degree. And I think now it's harder to get a really good job with just a bachelor's degree, not just in the United States, but in the world. I got a master's degree from the Fletcher School at Tufts University. I studied economics and international finance. And she asked afterwards, like, if they're humanitarians, they tend to choose that because of future academic careers or not only. I think it depends on what you study. For me, I wanted to work for the government in the Foreign Service, so I knew that. But when I got my degree, a lot of other students worked with NGOs. They worked, for example, the International Red Cross. Another one works for the World Bank. If you do well in economics and you do well in liberal arts and finance, you can get jobs pretty much anywhere. So that's why I chose that as my master's degree and not my bachelor's degree. From Anna Ostanenko, could people switch their major for masters? For masters, it depends on which program you go to. For the most part, going to a master's school is more specialized. As a bachelor, yeah, you can change and you can switch after a certain amount of time. But for the master's degree, like, for example, I applied to an international relations school. I could choose different fields in international relations, but I couldn't choose to study, for example, chemistry. As an undergrad, you can choose almost everything in your first 2 years, and you can switch. What do you think about the status of cars in college? All right, so that's a different thing. It depends on what college you go to. For example, the University of Virginia it's not in a big city, it's in a town, so you can walk everywhere. You don't need a car. Other schools in big cities like New York, say like Columbia University or Harvard and Boston, you don't need a car because you can take public transport. But there's some colleges where it's, you can't get anywhere, you need to drive, and then it's normal to have a car. But I think it really depends on, what you need and where you are. What major and what minor did you have at the University of Virginia? This is from Anna D. I majored in international relations or foreign affairs, and I minored in Middle Eastern studies. Arabic and the region. Okay. Can you tell us about your rates in your college? Well, if by rates, the expenses, that you can look up online. Every year, it's more and more expensive. Unfortunately, I don't like that. It's more expensive than when I was a student. But I believe if you're in state, it's 17,000 about per year, and if you're out of state, so if you're coming from Russia, it'd be $52,000. It's very expensive. We need to take loans when we're there. But if you talk about rates, my classes or how well I did. Sorry, one of those questions. Someone asked me if I took a trip to Kolomna. I have not been there yet. I would love to go, but I haven't been there. Um, did you like your college climates? Did you like your college students book? Yeah, I really liked it there. So Virginia, if climate, we can talk either about what the weather was like there, or we can talk about what it was like to study there. The climate, at least in Virginia, was mild. It was really nice, and we had a beautiful fall and a beautiful spring. It never got cold like it does here in Moscow, and it got hot in the summertime. So I like Moscow. It's just sometimes, man, the weather here is it's not the greatest, but I'm getting used to it. But the weather in Charlottesville was very mild. It was very nice. It was a lot warmer. But as far as like the climate of the people or the atmosphere, yeah, it was a very friendly school. People had a really positive attitude. People really enjoyed life there. So I really liked that. And my college students book, they were all right. Are there cool companies like in USA Films in the colleges, like Clicks maybe? Films like, Hollywood or films that you see in the movies or everything about colleges, like they have stereotypes and they exaggerate things. Some of the things are true. Like in universities, it's a bunch of young people who are free for the first time. So, people drink, people have a good time, but a lot of things are different. I don't know. I don't know if there's like cool companies or there's cool groups. Yeah, there can be cliques and there can be elitism. There can, like, for example, at University of Virginia, you had some people that were a lot wealthier or came from more elite families. And so they would have more money, they would do different things. And then you'd have more people like me who came from the middle class. And so there could be sometimes some elitism, but you see that everywhere. I don't think you would define one group as cool or one group as the other. You kind of did what you thought was interesting. So if you really like music, you would be in like a music clique. Or if you really like sports, you'd be in a sports clique. I guess you call them jocks. But it wasn't like that strict. You could be in different groups, Like I really like music, and I really like sports, and I really liked, going to plays. So it yes, you could be in different groups, but that was just what you were interested in. You weren't forced to be in one, and you could like move from one to the other. What's my favorite film? All right. What's my favorite film, book, and can I advise anything? All right. Favorite book is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Phenomenal book. Probably the greatest book. He's not my favorite author, but he wrote it, and it's really the end because it talks about what it is to be a good person, what it is to live a good life. So I love that book. Favorite film? I got two: Gladiator with Russell Crowe and Moulin Rouge, because they're awesome. I would highly recommend watching them. I love that. Let's see. And then anything Hemingway. Hemingway's great. Probably Farewell to Arms. And yeah, Farewell to Arms is a really good book. Question from Smiley Rain. What do you think about different events in college, New Year, Christmas, etc.? So unfortunately, usually New Year's or Christmas, that's when you would go home to your family. So we wouldn't have a lot of traditions like at Christmas or New Year's, because that's usually when you go home. But at the University of Virginia, we had the lighting of the lawn, which meant it was, I believe, like the first week of December, they would put lights up on the main quad, the main buildings of the area, and then everyone would go there and we'd sing songs and they'd turn it on. That was really cool. But then with my fraternity, what we did, which was really fun, is we would all get together, we'd have a good time. One or two of us would go drive off into like we live near the forest, so we'd go into the forest, we'd find a Christmas tree, we'd get this Christmas tree, and then we'd bring it back and decorate it. And I love that event. Every year we would do that. We'd sing songs and then we'd watch movies. Okay, so this is a serious question. What advice can you give to Russian students applying for undergrad or grad school in the United States? A, definitely consider it. It's a great experience. Especially if you've never been to the United States, you don't have exposure to it, and all you know about the United States is from movies. I would definitely say go to the United States to study, because you get a much better sense of what we are and who we are as a people. But as far as like advice for it, universities, what they're looking for is a complete person. They're looking for someone who's not just really good at really good at school, who gets really good marks. That's important. So definitely do well in school, definitely apply, definitely take the SAT. That's the test that most colleges look for. So I would definitely study on doing well on that. So do well in school, get good grades, do well on this test. But then beyond that, when you're applying to colleges, especially grad school and other things like that, it's important that you have a story. It's important that you're not just school. So, for example, when I was an undergrad, I did a lot of sports, but I also was involved in a lot of like different community activities. I did a lot of volunteering, and you show that you're not that like school doesn't define who you are. It's just one part of it, and you need to be able to tell a story of who you are and who you want to be. That's the most important thing. Think about yourself, who you are, who you want to be, and be able to tell that to people well. You should know. You should focus on your narratives, like why you're here, you did this, why, and this is going to make you go there. I would say that was probably the most important thing that I would recommend. What do you think about level of education in American colleges? Depends. By level of education, you mean the quality of education? I would say that the quality of education varies from school to school. The more competitive your school is, the higher the quality of education typically, because with the way our system works, it's competitive. If you want to go to Harvard, if you want to go to Stanford, if you want to go to the best schools, you have to be the best. You have to get the best scores. You have to do that. But that's because as a student, you expect to get the best education. You expect to get the best opportunities so that when you graduate, you can get the best jobs, right? It's a competition. So you can apply and go to any school in the United States, but you want to go to one that has a good reputation, that has good teachers, and also think about what you want to study. Some schools are really good at international relations. Some schools are very good at language. Like, for example, Middlebury is one of the best language schools in the country, maybe even in the world. It depends on what you're studying. Whereas if you want to be an engineer, MIT, I don't think you can get a better school in engineering than MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston. So I think, but then some colleges aren't as good. It depends on which college you go to, but we have a very high level of education in different schools. Some interesting festivals in college. Yeah, we got some. I think you would like it a lot, actually. For example, when we come back. All right, so there's two questions about festivals of colleges in U.S. and the United States. I would say it's really the holidays, for example. We wouldn't necessarily call it festivals, but Halloween is big. Halloween's probably the most fun holiday because it happens in autumn when people are in school and everyone gets dressed up and everyone throws parties and it's just such a good time. So Halloween is definitely a number one. I think you've seen it on shows. It's probably the one thing that they do right on TV. It's yes, some of it's a little bit of stereotype, but for the most part, it is as fun as it looks. Highly recommend Halloween. The other thing is St. Patrick's Day. I noticed you have the whoever asked the question put in the Irish colors. St. Patrick's Day is really big because we had a big group of immigrants from Ireland come over about 100 years ago when there was a famine there, about 100, 150 years ago. And so we have a lot of Irish pride in the United States. I'm not Irish, or I don't have Irish heritage, but I have Scottish heritage. And people really like to wear green. I guess I'm wearing green now, and just celebrating being Irish and our Irish heritage. And I think that's about it time-wise. And question-wise, if there's any more questions, I can answer. There's one question from Smiley Rain. Can you tell about systems of cards in American colleges? I'm not sure what a system of cards means. Perhaps if you're talking about how we get graded, I can talk about that very briefly. In the United States, we have something called the GPA, the grade point average, and that's based on, you have an A is 4 points, a B is 3 points, a C is 2 points, a D is 1 point, and failure is 0. And every time you take a grade, depending what grade you get a 4, a 3, or 2, or whatever you get, and you take the average of that. So that's your grade point average. You want to, if you're a really good student, you have a 4-point GPA. That's really good. Like a 4-point GPA means you're the best of the best. It's like getting all 5s in Russia. So that's really good. As I said, I didn't do very well my first year, but I graduated with I believe like a 3.3, which was like an A minus average. Not great, but it was okay. Can you tell about college's uniform? So we don't have uniforms per se. I think some high schools do, but almost in all universities in the U.S. these days, you can wear whatever you want. Typically, you would wear jeans and a t-shirt, or shorts and a t-shirt. You can wear anything actually. I'd say most people just wear jeans and t-shirts, and when in the wintertime, like a sweater. But one thing we do, as I said, we really like sports. So with basketball, you could buy a basketball jersey. I have one here, but I don't have it with me, or a football jersey, because you'd want to wear the sports uniform to support your team. All right, so this might be my last question, and then after that, I'm gonna say have a good day and have a good evening and stay safe. But it's what master's classes in college. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by master's classes. It's either master's degree or master's classes, but we do, in the lines of extracurricular activities, you can sign up for anything. Like different clubs hold different things, different activities, different things. It could be cooking, it could be dancing, as I said, ballroom dancing. It could be piano lessons. It could be that. I don't, having not done any of them besides taking a few ballroom dancing classes and doing sports, I can't really say too much about the master classes at college. I know that they have them. I know that if you're interested in them, especially at a bigger university like the University of Virginia, you can find whatever you want. In smaller schools, it sometimes can be a little bit harder. But I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in stuff like that and having variety, apply for a bigger school, just because you're not going to be limited by what's there. And I think, unless I'm mistaken, that is all I have for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed hearing about my experience, and that you seriously consider going to the University of Virginia. It's a great school. There are other great schools in the U.S., obviously, but I'm a little bit biased because, as a Virginian, I'm very proud of my school. I really enjoyed my time there, and it's a really good education, not just in the classroom, but also outside of it. So I hope that you have a wonderful evening and stay safe, and hope to see you guys in person when the coronavirus epidemic is over. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.